The other day, I was on my computer, kinda bored out of my mind, watching reheated leftovers on YouTube, going on some favorite forums for personal pleasure and torment alike. The usual for chronic internet goblins like myself. Not the most interesting sounding story, but there was this one piece of fighting game news that caught my eye. Not because I play them often, but because it was a crossover with... Wait, who the hell is this guy again? So I think this is probably a common experience with playing games of this era, but there's always a point where the intended method of play against escalating challenges becomes indiscernible. And not like in a, oh, it's just really hard way. Sometimes it's that, but with Pac-Man specifically, I don't think I've ever gotten to grips with the Ghost AI. I know it isn't random, at least in the original. I don't need another lecture on Pac-Man's genius game design to get that part. But no matter how much I see each ghost's movement patterns analyzed and broken down, I've never been able to make use of that information. For me, Pac-Man is an almost entirely vibes-based play experience. I eat the dots and hope for the best. Probably why I tend to get cornered by Bloopy and Doopy, and lose all my lives before clearing the first round. But it's hard to say I'm not having fun, at least. However, when the stars align, and I somehow intuit the ghost's behavior, I can perform an absolutely ethereal play that shatters worlds, channeling the spirit of a wealthy teenager at the arcades who is probably in their 50s now. Or, that's how it feels, anyway. I'm popping power pellets like drugs. You know, funny. Okay, I'll admit, I don't have much to say about the original Pac-Man. I'm no action button as much as I wish I were, and that doesn't come from total unfamiliarity with the series. Pac-Man is sort of the quintessential video game, so playing it at least once is practically passive to existing. It feels weird to even call it a series despite, you know, that being the truth. It's literally just true. Beyond that, I do have something of a connection to Pac-Man, even if it's not my literal lifeblood like a certain other kid-friendly mascot franchise. Here, though, it quite possibly couldn't get more normal and standard than this. Base form Pac-Man, one could say. But that's what sequels are for, right?
The second connection. The next installment. This is
Pac-Man 2, The New Adventures. There were actually a couple more Pac-Mans between, but I skipped past them, since 2 gives you the gist of what happened. Pac got married, had children, interfaced with a higher force to an unknown benefit, and now we have to get a milk bottle for the baby. You didn't miss much, really. Unlike its predecessor, you don't directly control Pac-Man. You use the on-screen cursor to nudge Pac in the right direction, or to slingshot objects, like puppeting the strings of an unwilling doll. But it doesn't have to be that way, as long as you're nice to the pizza-esque man. I can't lie, for the time I spent with this game, I really got into its whole adventure game pet simulator-ish angle for Pac-Man. I've never watched the Hanna-Barbera cartoon before, but I imagine it's kinda like playing an episode of that. You make Pac-Man go around town and come across many strange sights and challenges that need to be overcome for whatever menial task is at hand. You can stop by the arcade and play some games, like Pac-Man. This has deeply worrying implications, but I like enacting video game violence, so I don't mind it too much. Still, it's hard not to wonder how much autonomy the real Pac-Man has over all this.
You need more cartridges.
Okay, cool, sure. It's so much like a cartoon that the music score is reactive to Pac-Man's mood, fluctuating in tempo as well as the music generally capturing the tonal chaos likely underway on screen. I was gonna say how impressed I was by the dynamic music, but the system seems way simpler on a marginally closer inspection. Still, it works surprisingly well for what it is. But the strings sound like dying cats, though. Pac-Man as a point-and-click game? What were they thinking? So, yeah, this was kind of a tuber game, if you get what I mean. Among the echelon of Bubsy 3D, Hotel Mario, Ride to Hell Retribution, Superman 64, and various others. Games to be sardonically discussed as a means to an end, primarily for the online funny guys that spawned in AVGN's wake. Maybe it was just one guy in this instance. I don't feel the need to do further digging on the specifics. The point is, you'll rarely see anyone talking about this game in a positive light, if at all in the present day. Which isn't surprising, but I personally like to think this game is more than the punchline to, they made a sequel to Pac-Man. There's been plenty of Pac-Man games before and after too that probably deserve the numbered title more, ones that have the maze gameplay beyond a minigame of the original, metatextually present within the game's universe, which I'd rather not linger on the thematic ramifications of. But for a game as iconic and influential as Pac-Man, maybe it's more sensible that its numbered follow-up shares so little in common with the original's strong points. That's gotta be worth something. So, I never actually got the milk. Couldn't figure out how, so I pelted rocks at Pac-Man to piss him off, as he deserves as my possibly unwilling peon. Don't know if I was interacting with it wrong, or if I needed to go somewhere else to be able to obtain it, but I still had fun bumbling around with Pac-Man and making him do stupid shit. I never expected a player-slash-protagonist conflict meta-narrative in Pac-Man, but maybe that's what the 2 stands for. The second Pac entity. Okay, this bit is dumb. Let's move on. This is an interesting one. In the 90s, Namco released a full-blown reimagining of the original Pac-Man for arcades, though console ports wouldn't happen for a while. Luckily, I'm not bound by the constraints of the 20th century, so I get to play the arcade version in all of its glory, or something along those lines. What? Well, as it turns out, Pac-Man Arrangement is actually 5 other games in a trench coat. Or, I guess 3 games, then 3 more games derived from the former in a trench coat. A recursive set of trench coats like those Matryoshka dolls. I did not know this until now. I can't really say I'm all that into the other 2 games present here, or I guess the other 4. Dig Dug's gameplay loop has always felt a bit clunky to me, compared to Pac-Man's near frictionless action, and that hasn't changed much with the Arrangement version. And to be real, I've never played Rally X up until now. It's fine. But this isn't a video about Namco's other arcade games. I haven't gotten that deep down the rabbit hole yet. So let's get into the main suspiciously pack-shaped meat of this compilation. For some reason, I thought this game had an isometric perspective, but maybe that's in a later port or something. The Arrangement version isn't just a graphical facelift, it's got new music, new gimmicks, and, among other things, my god, more maze layouts. There's also new bonus items, or whatever they're called, so you can finally make good on John Dorkley's promise and pop actual pills. Which reminds me, the music's got a much more standard J-pop sound to it now, compared to the complete silence and occasional ragtime jazz of the original. Pointing that out since I know some of you freaks are into that stuff. That may also include me. Another major addition is the 5th ghost appearing on the board, which can apparently combine with another into an even stronger ghost, as well as netting more points when caught. A fairly natural escalation of the risk versus reward behavior from the original game. Arrangement is a really fun remake in general, even if it ends up feeling more difficult from the new stuff it brings to the table. But I still can't quite shake the feeling that something is off. Shit, this is the wrong game, isn't it? When I was coming up with Pac-Man games to discuss for this video, there was one that immediately came to mind, so naturally, I tried to get my hands on a game I thought was called Pac-Man Arrangement. And not only was it not standalone, it was an entirely different game than what I remembered, but still similar enough in general concept that I didn't catch on at first. Basically, I got tricked twice by my own memory. The actual game is called Pac-Mania, which is also a reimagining of the original Pac-Man with new board layouts, new mechanics, and more ghosts chasing you down. But importantly, the isometric perspective I brought up earlier. Honestly, after playing it, I still prefer Arrangement's take on the maze gameplay. The ability to jump over hazards is cool and all, but the movement feels too sluggish for my liking, on top of the skewed perspective making it harder to judge when you can turn. It's strange how these two games that were released nearly a decade apart took such similar yet different approaches to reinventing the original Pac-Man, even when taking into account the series' cyclical nature. I severely doubt Namco was scheming to make confusingly similar games, but the befuddle is present nonetheless. Doesn't help that there's another game called Pac-Man Arrangement that is somewhat based off the 1996 version, but is also kind of its own thing, and one that is also part of a game compilation with arrangement versions also loosely based off ones from the original Namco Classic Collection Volume 2, but also Galaga is there, which may or may not be from the first volume, not to be confused with Namco Museum Volume 2, which is the follow-up to the Japanese/Korean exclusive Namco Museum, which in and of itself shouldn't be mistaken with Namco Museum Volume 1. That one came out on PS1, not PSP, but really Namco Museum Battle Collection is preferable since it has the contents of both volumes, though if you only want the yellow guy, you should probably just pick up Pac-Man Museum Plus or something. A lot of long-running franchises are like that. It's not that strange. So let's get stranger. For a moment, let's pretend you're me. Age probably somewhere in the realm of single digits, a Nintendo DS in hand, the absence of a stylus in the other because you lost it. You're so young, in fact, all of your gaming memories are a haze of moments you can't assign into any particular order, or really even the context in which you played said games, where you may or may not have obtained them from, etc. No matter how much time passes, that outdoor pool still seems like a gargantuan lake. Those blades of grass still engulf your visage, trees that feel like a forest, stairs that ascend for ages. And above all else, Pac-Man World 3 for Nintendo DS still feels like a nightmare you can't wake up from, which isn't an assertion of quality, it's a fact of its nature. To quickly preface, I haven't played any other Pac-Man Worlds, and besides the passing interest in the recent remake of the first, I have little immediate desire to change that. I'm not sure how to even begin to explain this. This is what the first stage's opening moments look like. You're dropped straight into the fog, and there's no turning back now. For so many years, this was the only thing I could remember about the game. An opening level filled with toxic waste, dilapidated machinery, and just a pervasive sense of devastation beyond what video game mechanics can convey. All things Pac-Man is well known for. They even have the slow, foreboding score like the one in Pac-Land. I don't know how it escalates to this point. There's an intro cutscene of Pac-Man coming home to his family on his 25th birthday. A cute little meta joke referencing the series' 25th anniversary at the time. I bet it was pretty funny in 2005. Not so funny now in 2025. And then, for whatever reason, there's something inside Pac-Man's birthday cake, and things happen? And he gets tossed around? It cuts to black at an arbitrary point, and Pac-Man's in the greenhouse gas zone now. The shot continuity is nigh incomprehensible, with still frames going back and forth between both screens, but even then, shit just kind of happens with zero context given. I didn't realize the subseries had such impenetrable continuity for those not tapped into both prior entries. The only tapping you'll be doing here is, well, on the bottom screen. This is a DS game released in 2005, after all, so you bet they found a slew of odd and uncomfortable ways for players to utilize the bottom screen. Activating switches, turning doohickeys, performing a part of your moveset after initiating it with a pre-existing face button, which appears to be solely dedicated to charging it up. Conventional wisdom would dictate you use your right hand, with a stylus if preferred. No. You can't do that, unless you want to claw grip in a particularly horrific manner. The least problematic method I found is using your left thumb, but I still would hardly call it ideal. Despite what I've said though, the DS really is an incredible piece of hardware. The wonderfully weird experiences pioneered by the dual screens and touch interface are innumerable, even if its gimmick didn't necessarily shape the future of all games moving forward. And with that off-kilter system design, many developers seemingly had no clue what to do with it, especially when it came to multi-platform games like World 3. Alongside a general overestimation of the hardware's technical prowess, including from Nintendo's own development teams to an extent, Pac-Man World 3 is yet another among the bunch sent kicking and screaming onto these dual screens. It's far from noteworthy in that regard, but as much as I wish I didn't continue being that guy, this twisted, fucked up version of a presumably much higher quality console game is kind of immaculate. I wouldn't be here without the analog movement mapped to jerky 8-directional input, or the HUD with visual design so disjointed it resembles a debug display, or the technical limits enforcing this hazy aesthetic. It's not a good game in the traditional sense. I do not love Pac-Man World 3. I've never even gotten past the first stage for such a love to be validated, for this first impression of the game's dreary theming to be corroborated. There might be sunshine and rainbows in the second level for all I know. It's as out of context in 2025 as it was in my vague memory of the green fog many years ago, and I can't help but keep remembering. So I decided I wanted to play a bit further, mainly out of curiosity. Obviously, as per 2000's 3D platformer tradition, there's a slight emphasis on bashing enemies until you're allowed to progress, but there's actually another gameplay style introduced after the first stage, i.e. Pac-Man. It's Pac-Man. I honestly love how the bottom screen shows the current board with the original arcade game sprites. It might have been the game's most fun use of both screens, if it weren't for the fact that the main 3D view doesn't show shit. And yes, the shift of game mode is equally as abrupt as the results screen preceding it. And as it turns out, yes, the rest of the game does seem to look and feel like that. You could never escape the fog. I got the answers I sought out, so I didn't play past this point. Maybe by 2030 I'll get halfway through stage 2, but until then, or whenever, I'm leaving it off here. Would it have made more sense to play the console version for the best possible experience? Yes, but that might be missing the point of a video titled Strange Pac-Man Things. And if you couldn't tell by now, this is the version of the game I'm the most fond of. Despite its troubles, the movement is still more fluid than Super Mario 64 DS. God, that is way too many syllables for a game title. So, here's the reason this video is about strange Pac-Man games. What if Pac-Man was deliberately dark and twisted? This is one of many horrific thoughts I experience every night, and it's apparently also one the fine fellows at Bandai Namco had when making Shadow Labyrinth. Yes, it was developed internally to my knowledge. I checked. I cannot name a more bizarre marketing campaign than the one for this game. Hey, here's this TV anthology series with episodes based on various video games, and the one about Pac-Man is a grimdark sci-fi story where someone is coerced into destroying opposing life by a robotic entity named Puck. And a couple months later, oh by the way, here's the game it's adapted from. It's out next year in July. Merry Christmas! A reimagining of this type was already going to have an uphill battle on its conceit alone, but this odd introduction I think solidified its reputation among many folks, diehard Pac fans or otherwise. This game was destined to be unloved, a strange one-off experiment without the tone or styling that got people invested in the series beyond that original arcade game, to be banished to the metaphysical realm of the clearance aisle for $13.99. Or to put it more simply, why give a shit? Well, even if it may not be reciprocated, I don't think this was a game made without love. Doing a gritty take on a beloved ungritty gaming IP isn't exactly the move nowadays. That time came and went with the PS360 Dead Wife ARM retro revival wave. It's certainly not a big release, if that $30 price tag is anything to go by, but the social media countdown featuring new cross-promotional art from various folks at Bandai Namco, and the whole secret level thing in general makes me think there's at least a good deal of faith placed in this game, even if it is a weird little humble thing. And ultimately, that's what sold me on Shadow Labyrinth. I am prey to marketing when its conceit is bizarre enough. But what is the game actually like, though? Is it compelling beyond being twisted and other very specific adjectives? Yes, I did pre-order the game. No, I didn't use the arcade sound effects option that came with the pre-order. The main menu here totally threw me off guard. People walking by what is presumably the protagonist in a big city, set to a remarkably good jazz piece. Shadow Labyrinth is apparently an isekai thing. The protagonist gets warped inside the device they're holding when you press start, and it remains abandoned on the ground on every subsequent launch. After a fairly lengthy intro sequence, we're dropped in-game as Swordsman number 8 with Puck on our side to consume darkness and whatnot. Definitely not a bad guy, don't try looking them up on the villains wiki. I have a lot to say about this game, so I'm gonna try and go over it as efficiently as possible. Something that stood out to me was just how smooth the movement is, despite its shortcomings in some spots. Even before you accumulate tons of upgrades in typical Metroidvania fashion, your base moveset is really agile. Mainly the slide chaining that'll have you soaring through corridors like Symphony of the Night on something illicit. Seriously, it's so fast, I found myself using it nearly as much as the actual dodge roll during enemy encounters. Speaking of, the combat is also really fun to play around with. Well, it's not really groundbreaking to be clear, it's about as conventional as you can get, but sometimes a little bit of basic 3-hit combo, dodge roll iframes, and a perk system is all you need. Though if there's anything worth highlighting, the Zelda 2-esque sword bounce is pretty cool. The bosses though, my experience with them fluctuated wildly. On one hand, they can be displays of the game at its best, rushing in and kicking their asses with resources to spare. But on the other, beating them can feel a bit hopeless, tossing yourself at a wall that's just an inch or two from being a comfortable challenge, even when it seems like you're properly strategizing. Overcoming them isn't too frustrating, but it can feel draining. The parry you obtain a couple hours in does help smooth things out more, but that still isn't an especially viable option. But you know what does help? Cool ass fucking mech that makes you entirely invulnerable. Just wish I was able to use it more often, but I understand game balance may have been more of a priority there. Oh, by the way, this is a Pac-Man thing. I like how the mini puck form interplays with regular combat. Honestly, it's fun in general to quickly jump around in mini puck form, with or without any particular reason. And true to its name, Shadow Labyrinth is, in fact, a sprawling exploratory action game. But if you suck ass at finding your way in these kinds of games as much as I do, I'm pleased to say I never found making progress to be all that inscrutable throughout my first 8 hours of play. That's maybe not a good thing, but I can't say the linearity was too overbearing either. So, this game's pretty neat and all, but did it actually need to be a Pac-Man game, let alone the 45th anniversary game? Look, I don't say that from a place of skepticism, but out of genuine curiosity. Would it have been better if the Pac-Man stuff was stripped out, letting Shadow Labyrinth be its own original dark action game? Well, there's a bit more classic Namco here than just Pac-Man. See, this game has what we in the business like to call a story. And there is a lot of story in this instance. Narrative threads coming in from all cylinders that just so happen to cross your view. Things that have been built up for years, not culminating, but merely arriving at another destination. This is all because this game is set in Bandai Namco's UGSF timeline, a universe with a rich history spanning across decades of classics and other assorted games. Okay, you probably don't need to read up on all this external lore shit to understand this game, but even for someone like me who hasn't, it's clear as day that Shadow Labyrinth is building off pre-established story elements from previous Namco games. It's not all completely made up for this twisted take on Pac-Man, and that's pretty damn fascinating to me. I'm not really the type to obsess over lore and timeline shenanigans, at least when it comes to anything in this sphere, but it feels so fully realized and thought through that I can't help but give it the light of day. Primarily, the crossover stuff comes in the form of name-dropping other game titles in new contexts. Bosconians are an alien life form, Galaga is an emperor, the kind of shit that makes you double-check their Wikipedia pages to make sure you didn't miss any vital story info. Also, Xevious. One of the major factions present in Shadow Labyrinth is the authoritative FUM known as the UGSF, the timeline namesake and the ones we carry out missions for throughout most games in said timeline. Not necessarily here, I think. I still haven't gotten around to seeing the story to its conclusion, because the game's pretty damn long, though I imagine I wouldn't understand these intersecting factions much more by the end. I wish I could delve into all these connections further, but unfortunately I'm mostly in the dark beyond the surface level things. I don't mind too much though, it's kind of insane. The backtracking after dying can get annoying, the map screen is slow, the music isn't all too memorable, but the world building shines through the night as the game's strongest element. You really can't make a game like this by accident. That last part, anyways. Gonna stop myself there before I get too deep into my esoteric pack ramblings. Overall, what do I think of Shadow Labyrinth? Or at least what I played of it. I don't know if I'll end up finishing it by the time this video's out. I think it's pretty good. Maybe even a number out of number if I feel so inclined. I wasn't totally blown away, and I wasn't entirely turned off by it either. It was just a pretty good time for the most part. But that doesn't matter as much to me as this. The people making this game seemingly gave a damn about turning a juvenile concept like Pac-Man but fucked up and evil into something with genuine depth and intrigue to it. It almost harkens back to before the series' identity was firmly established, with all kinds of strange interpretations of the abstract pixel art in that arcade game. And like many things in this industry, you can never take the weird ideas for granted at a higher scale. I understand why some might feel totally alienated by Shadow Labyrinth in the greater context of Pac-Man, especially the crowd that fell in love with stuff like World 2 and want to see a return to it, whether it be another remake or a whole new game. And maybe in a different series, Shadow Labyrinth might have felt downright out of touch. But Pac-Man's no Klonoa, no ill will by the way. They're gonna keep making normal Pac-Man things because it's Pac-Man, the most culturally evergreen video game ever, probably. Which at the very least, should ease some worries about the series' near future, even if they never make that one game you've always dreamed of. Hey, wait a minute. I didn't edit that in. Well, regardless, classic Pac-Man isn't going anywhere, and I think it's really sick that such a different take on the series got the green light, even if this Mario in 2013 ass game has its rough patches. But maybe, for the truest freaks out there, this is just the right kind of game. Someone loved it, and I can't help but at least love that. I wasn't trying to do a through line with this, that sort of came about naturally.